When David Carter pulled up to the runway in his dented pickup, laughter rippled through the glass walls of the executive lounge. The 39-year-old mechanic, tall, dark-skinned, and carrying a toolbox that looked older than some of the jets parked nearby, was met with stares of disbelief. Inside the lounge, a cluster of men in designer suits exchanged smirks. "Is this the guy you called for Ms. Monroe's jet?" scoffed Daniel Brooks, head of operations for Monroe Aviation. His tone dripped with disdain. "We asked for a certified technician, not a roadside repairman." David heard it, but his expression didn't flicker. He had endured such comments all his life. What no one there realized was that his scarred hands had repaired more luxury aircraft than anyone in that room. 15 years of work, multiple safety awards, and countless executives still alive because of his precision, but to them his appearance spoke louder than his resume. The runway supervisor approached him carefully, as though distance might preserve status. "The jet must be airborne in 2 hours," he said. "Our staff can't locate the fault. If you can't fix it quickly, we'll call the Atlanta division." On the tarmac, the Monroe family's Gulfstream G700 shimmered under the sun, a $70 million emblem of power. As David approached, he felt the weight of eyes pressing through the glass. Most were filled with doubt. One pair, however, was sharp, focused, belonging to none other than Evelyn Monroe herself, the 44-year-old CEO who owned both the jet and the empire it represented. "Let him work," Evelyn's voice cut across the silence. Her tailored suit and commanding stride silenced the murmurs. She walked directly to David, ignoring the puzzled looks of her staff. "How long will this take?" she asked, meeting his gaze without hesitation. "That depends on what I find, ma'am," he answered steadily. "You have 1 hour. Impress me." Her words were clipped, almost like a challenge. While the executives retreated into air-conditioned comfort, David lifted the main access panel. His practiced eyes immediately spotted what the others had missed, a catastrophic failure in the pressurization system, mistaken by the airport's crew as a simple wiring glitch. Left unfixed, it would have doomed every passenger on board. His hands moved quickly, precise as a surgeon's. He wasn't just repairing a machine. He was preventing disaster. Through the corner of his eye, he noticed Evelyn watching, not with scorn but with recognition, as though she could already sense this man was different. In under 30 minutes, David sealed the panel, wiped the sweat and grease from his hands, and began collecting his tools. To him, it was just another job, a job where perfection was expected and gratitude was rare. But when Evelyn emerged again, alone this time, there was a shift in the air. "How long would it have taken them to find the real issue?" she asked quietly. "They wouldn't have," David replied without hesitation. "That jet would have gone down before they figured it out." The weight of his words settled heavily. Evelyn studied him for a moment that seemed a stretch. Then she simply said, "Walk with me." The stunned executives watched as Evelyn Monroe, a billionaire whose words shaped boardrooms and governments, led the mechanic away from the jet. Whispers followed them, but nothing could mask the unease now gripping Daniel Brooks, who had once stolen credit for innovations that weren't his. What none of them realized yet was that this chance encounter would expose secrets long buried in the company's history, and begin rewriting both David's fate and the future of Monroe Aviation itself. As attorney Melissa Cho sifted through the thick folder of evidence, Daniel Rivers began to realize something unusual about Evelyn Monroe. She wasn't simply trying to correct an old injustice. There was more to her actions. In her eyes, he saw determination, yes, but also a deeper recognition. What the executives around her didn't know was that Evelyn carried her own secret. Her leather case didn't just hold documents about the disputed G7 system. It contained the results of a quiet 2-year investigation into widespread discrimination and stolen intellectual property within her company. Daniel wasn't the first victim, only the most obvious one. Others had been pushed aside in silence, their ideas stolen, and their careers buried. Evelyn had waited for the right opportunity, and now it had arrived. Meanwhile, across the parking lot, Robert Kane was making frantic phone calls to members of the board. His influence was slipping away, but he still had allies and leverage. What he didn't realize was that every word of his desperate calls was being tracked, every move recorded. Inside Evelyn's private meeting room, Daniel shifted uncomfortably in a high-back chair. She closed the door, sealing them off from the bustle of the airport. "That pressurization fix you just performed," she began, her tone precise, "was a modification of the G7 model, wasn't it?" Daniel nodded calmly. "Yes, ma'am." "A system Robert Kane claims he designed, the one that earned him millions in bonuses," she continued. Sliding a folder across the table, she added, except these original blueprints are signed with your initials." The silence was heavy. 5 years ago, Evelyn pressed on, you were a junior engineer here. You submitted a completed design, and 3 days later, you were fired for so-called incompetence. I had bills to pay, Daniel replied evenly. Mechanic work pays bills. Evelyn leaned forward. Do you know what else I uncovered? You weren't the only one. Over the last decade, at least 7 employees, all from minority backgrounds, were dismissed right after contributing critical innovations. At that moment, the door opened. A composed woman stepped in carrying a tablet. Evelyn introduced her as Melissa Cho, the company's new general counsel. Melissa had been investigating for months. Mr. Rivers, we have ample evidence of systemic intellectual property theft. Yours is only one case, though one of the strongest. Memories resurfaced for Daniel. Late nights solving complex problems, the pride of finding solutions no one else could, Kane's sharp smile when he noticed the results, and the shame of being escorted out of the building. Why tell me all this? Daniel asked. Because I need you, Evelyn replied. Robert Kane controls half the board. His network is powerful. I need undeniable proof to take him down. And what's in it for me? Recognition, royalties, and, she hesitated slightly, the director of innovation role, the job that was stolen from you 5 years ago. Daniel gave a dry laugh. You really think the board would accept a black mechanic as director? They'll have no choice, Evelyn answered with a rare smile. Melissa pushed a confidentiality contract toward him, but the moment was broken by loud knocking. Robert Kane barged in, wearing his usual mask of false concern. Evelyn, the board is waiting. And why is this contract worker still here? We were discussing the G7 system, Evelyn said evenly. Kane's face blanched. He tried to recover, scoffing. What could a mechanic possibly add to advanced engineering? Evelyn turned her tablet toward him, displaying a blueprint signed Dr. Kane forced a laugh. Minor contributions at best. Minor? Evelyn shot back. I have your emails recommending his dismissal just days after he submitted this design. Kane stiffened, trying to redirect. Evelyn, the board won't sit around for conspiracy theories. Robert, you are suspended pending investigation, she said firmly. You can't do that, he barked. The board will hear in an hour, she replied coldly. Leave now if you want any dignity left. When the door slammed behind him, Evelyn turned back to Daniel. We have 2 weeks until the shareholders' meeting. We'll need evidence. I have something better, Daniel said quietly. The original G7 prototype, complete with dated records and digital signatures. And, his eyes darkened, recordings. Recordings? Evelyn leaned forward. From 5 years ago, Kane describing how he planned to erase my authorship. Word for word. Melissa raised her brows, impressed. How on earth did you manage that? Daniel finally allowed himself a faint smile. I grew up fixing broken electronics in the roughest part of the city. People like me learn early to keep insurance against people like him. What Evelyn didn't know was that Daniel's files went beyond his own case. During his years working quietly as a mechanic, he had compiled evidence of every stolen design and every buried innovation. His unassuming role had been his best disguise, giving him time to build the ultimate weapon against corruption. 6 months later, Monroe Aviation Headquarters was almost unrecognizable. The executive wing, once uniform and exclusive, now reflected genuine diversity. At its center stood Daniel Rivers, no longer a faceless mechanic but the company's director of technological innovation. The extraordinary shareholders meeting months earlier had stunned the industry. Evelyn and Melissa had presented undeniable evidence, including the damning recording of Robert Kane sneering, "Who would believe someone like him created this? Our customers trust me, not people like that." The outrage in the room had shaken the company to its core. The stock tumbled at first, but the reforms that followed created an unprecedented rebound. Daniel proposed a groundbreaking initiative, a program to identify every past employee whose contributions had been erased, rewarding them retroactively, and launching an innovation fund to empower underrepresented communities. Kane, stripped of his titles and credibility, faced lawsuits that ruined his career. Meanwhile, Daniel and Evelyn launched the Monroe Community Innovation Center in Daniel's old neighborhood, offering technical training and real opportunities to young minds. Within months, several patents had already emerged from its students. During the center's opening ceremony, Evelyn remarked, if Kane had shared credit, he might still be here. But greed blinds people to the potential of others. Later, she surprised Daniel with an unexpected partnership. Not marriage, as the tabloids speculated, but a merger. Her aerospace empire joined with Daniel's small engineering company, one he had quietly maintained out of his garage during those lost years. Overnight, he became a co-owner of the very corporation that once cast him out. On the one-year anniversary of that morning on the runway, Monroe Aviation unveiled a new propulsion system from Daniel's team, cutting commercial fuel consumption nearly in half. Evelyn's words rang across the hall. "A year ago, many of you mocked a man while he saved lives. Today, that same man is helping save our industry." Daniel stood at the podium, scanning faces. Some applauded out of genuine respect, others merely out of necessity. But what mattered most were the young engineers, many from backgrounds once excluded, now standing proudly in positions they deserved. In the front row sat his mother, who had spent her life cleaning corporate offices so he could study. Her tears told him all he needed to know. Real change, Daniel concluded, isn't just breaking through barriers for yourself. It's tearing them down so others don't have to fight the same battles. The story of the mechanic who became co-owner spread worldwide, inspiring new programs across industries. Success didn't erase years of prejudice, but it gave Daniel a platform to turn pain into progress. Watching the students at his community center, he understood his true victory, not his title, not his wealth, but ensuring that future generations would never be silenced the way he once was.